just like to read from this piece of work, which is slightly off the theme of smell, but it was produced by Hesterglock last year in the May and June. It was quite smelly in the rooms where it was being made in May and June last year, because it was about the hottest time of the year, where I had set up a 6-week session on surrealism, surrealist techniques for mental health and well-being in a mental health charity outreach centre called Loaves and Fishes. And what we ended up doing is creating a kind of surrealist boot camp which produced this, which is a kind of micro novel. It's a collaborative micro novel. And I'd just like to read a little bit from it. I'd like, first of all, to thank Hesterglock for putting it together. So the people who were part of it are kind of just a set of fractal voices, really. None of them were in work at the time. There were lots of people in the group who had quite bad experiences of life, and several of them just hadn't had any kind of formal education. So this was the first thing they produced as well. So it was, for me, a pretty amazing experience. So I'm just going to read the epilogue to it, which you'll get a sense of their voices coming in. When I say it was a boot camp, I basically had people respond to constraints, but also just to perform as automatically as possible. So kind of they surprised themselves. And this is just called Daydream from Alstuff, which you'll notice, by the way, is another combination of Salford. And in fact, we were quite smug about this until we realised there is actually a German city called Alsdorf. And in fact, the book's been to that city now, been introduced to the mayor, who was a bit bemused by it. And you'll probably be able to tell why when I read you a little bit from it. So this is Prelude Daydream from Alsdorf. It's got like 6 voices in it. Due to the compressed amplitude of the sound and the sky with the undulating troughs of speed and tempting the fate of past and present going into the tunnel of time, rainbows everywhere, orange food, where do we go from here? The world is coming to an end, and we're off, wondering where hell will break and what kind of now we will create. Can we feel and find and solve all the world's problems? Can we find a place to break through the mould or the void of stargazing and blue lagoons of the darkness of Earth's secret tunnels and warrens and perceiving in it a star? Too many traffic lights in the city, you get angry when you're late going somewhere, the lights are 5 seconds apart, and I sit in my cell looking at the bare walls, cobwebs, and I wonder what my outcome will be. Here I am, alone and frightened, knowing I am the true Queen of Scotland, knowing I was betrayed by one of my closest friends for a ransom of money. Explosions everywhere. Where can we go? Into space? To the moon? How do we get there? Who do we go with? Pack a suitcase. The golden daffodils and fields now replaced by homeless people, sleeping rough, and people on street corners begging. Wondering whether the executioner will do a very quick job. I'm not frightened of the outcome, just the fact I'm leaving people behind. And peacefulness now broken by shouting and screaming. How do I release my reason and open my head to the light and love that is required to make me alive and human? People who now live in squalor and don't know what to do. Men and women and children suffering in silence, afraid to ask for help. And coming out of the other side of the essence of taste, back through the passage of your self-awareness, without being in any frame of reference to hold yourself accountable for everything. So that was the epilogue. I'm just going to read. Sorry, that was the prologue. I'm just going to read a tiny bit from the epilogue, and then I do have a little tribute to smell at the end of this as well. So this is epilogue. Now the grass is crawling beneath me, and if I put out the cigarette, I will harm things. The teeth as sharp as a band, the refractions of light hurting but yellow like fluffy pillows of sunflowers. The beautiful fine bedding was luxurious. I wonder where it was bought. I am the thought on the bath in the room without mirrors, eyes as wide as a black hole. This great big toad loved his toadstool, shuffling on it until he was settled. Then he fell off into the mud. Who picked him up and cleaned him up? Prisoners of drops of water, we are nothing but perpetual animals. The dirty water full of stars. Open the dustpan and sweep up the void and shiny bits. Do you think my name is Cinderella? Oh yes, my dear, there is a Cinderella in each one of us. God, I hope I can get to this rave in November. I live in the destroyed section of town known as your face. The engine of perpetual motion was actually an old puffer train made out of matchsticks, which L.S. Lowry had painted. Great man, with such a talent. I would have loved to have met him. And C had the last say. And that was the end of that. I'll just put that in a minute. I've got a few copies of that. If anybody's interested in having a look at it even, the one who goes to the charity. But I've got one last thing to do, which is a smell poem. It's called Sting Bomb, and it's just in response to having read Steve's work. So it was. I was thinking about how smell is very unruly, and how they had an experiment in the 1950s when cinema was shitting its pants that TV was going to take over and leave nothing for them to do, where they started to try and invent films where there was smell coming into the auditorium and so on. It never really worked, for obvious reasons really, because it was never put in at the right time and nobody had the same response to it. So this isn't a poem about that, it's called Stink Bomb, and it's just the fact that smell is unruly. This is a kind of smell film. Stink Bomb. Crush capsule underfoot and fade up on smell-orama. Sweat of yesterday. My dog's got no nose. My star-nosed mole, by contrast, reeks of the universe on fire. Cinder toffee of white dwarves on their way out forever. Wild particles. The forest we could rove, hunting monsters and smelling of mints and floor lacquer. What's your pheromone of choice? I take strawberry lip balm, toasted garlic, lavender water, packer rabanne, and apple shampoo, fresh linen, cut grass, morning coffee, sunburn, aromarama, and olfactory deficits, compulsion to map, release a cloud, who did it? Scented pissoirs in a multitude of early pubs like deranged flower beds, and whiff of cancer announced in a late life, my grandfather's. All the while, your voice of baked bread and eyes of spent gunpowder. Take me away, paper of ancient books, to libraries reaching back through centuries. Dust of yesterday, where do you lead? Now, close in on bonfire smoke, track inside the scent of one you loved, fade to a cloud of cinnamon. That's it.